Hey, how you doing? It's your boy Brogi Naric back again with another review talking about wrestling. So you know we got to do it on the Bump Psychology segment. It's been a while since I've done any videos talking about wrestling, but I decided to wait till one of my favorite shows came back, and that is Dark Side of the Ring, which is on Vice TV. The third season has recently dropped, and I'm going to be reviewing the premiere, which focuses on famous wrestler Brian Pillman. And before I get into this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And thanks for doing so. So this series is back, one of my favorite shows, and they're going full force with this third season. They got it like, I think last season was like 10 episodes, and I ended up reviewing about half of those episodes last year. That was like early pandemic, and it was a fun time. So I plan to review all the episodes from this season. I believe it's like 15 or so episodes this season. They definitely did more, and I believe they're splitting it up into two halves. So yeah, I'll be doing these if you want to see more, because those videos have been doing well. It's gonna be me. I'm gonna have some guests from time to time talking about this great show, and this episode was a great premiere. They usually kill it with the premieres. I think the first season, the premiere was the Macho Man episode, which was kind of weak. Although I know the not weak, but it was okay. But I know the Bruiser Brody one was the main one that they promoted. And last season they started with the Crispin Wall story. It was like a two-parter. Both episodes were an hour or about an hour, and it also focused on Eddie Guerrero. And this season starts off with a two-parter focusing on Brian Pillman. And I'm just going to start talking about Brian Pillman. He's not one of my favorite wrestlers because I haven't seen that much of his work. I definitely, in a while before the WWE Network disappeared, I would go back and watch a lot of the old WCW, like early 90s stuff, and occasionally Brian Pillman would pop up, and I always respected him, and especially as he went on for what he, his character, the loose cannon character, how unique that was, and how he was able to, as they say, break the fourth wall. His uniqueness with his promos, and then his style back in the day was very indicative of what wrestling is now. You got not the biggest guys, but very athletic guys jumping around, taking crazy bumps. He did all of that, and he's definitely been an inspiration for a lot of modern day wrestlers. And I always, thought he had a unique look. And but his story is insane. I definitely learned much more about him from this episode. Brian Pillman, he was a undersized Cincinnati Bengals player. He started out in football. He also played for the Buffalo Bills and then ended up in playing Canadian football. He eventually became a wrestler after suffering from an ankle injury, and he worked in Canada and Calgary, Canada, working at Stampede Wrestling, which was run by Stu Hart, who is the father of Owen and Bret Hart. And the series basically tells his early career in a very interesting way. And then him working at the Dungeon, which is why he was close with the Hart family later on in the 90s when he was part of the Hart Foundation. So I like, learning a little more about the reasoning behind that. And also we get into his first run in WCW, where he was, young up-and-coming guy. We see Dave Meltzer, who is the editor for the Wrestling Observer newsletter, talking about how he had spotted Brian Pillman and wrote good articles about him, and they became friends, and how JR would say that Meltzer was a good eye for talent, and that led him to hiring Brian into WCW. But the episode, one of the big stars of this episode was Stone Cold Steve Austin, which I was pleased that he was involved, because I was like, it's going to be weird if they do this episode and don't have Steve Austin there. Brian Pillman and Steve Austin were in the tag team known as the Hollywood Blondes, which was kind of like not the most well-known or well-remembered tag team, technically, but people think of it because it was early Brian Pillman and early Stone Cold Steve Austin before they were, the legends that they are now. And I like the moment where Steve shows off the gold chain that he and Brian Pillman would wear when they would work as a tag team and stuff. And I like how he explained, like, it was just like a random thrown together tag team. He knew Brian, but they weren't like the best of friends. And then he wanted to be a single star, but now he's got to deal with a tag team. And how Brian was really the brain behind the team, coming up with the name and the outfits, some of the stuff they would do. And how this team, even though it was kind of thrown together, they made the bet. They took chicken shit, made chicken salad, and did their best to get over, to make other teams look good, because they were kind of like a mid-level team essentially. But they also talk about how that team eventually fell apart because of a match with him. It was those two versus Flair, and I think Flair and Arn, and the pay-per-view didn't do well. So clearly it was the team's fault. It was the Hollywood Blonde's fault, and that's kind of how one of the issues with WCW, especially early WCW, was the management, the people who were running it, the different bookers would switch so often. Different people had different ideas, and certain things just get lost in the shuffle. And they squandered both of those talents, which is, it happens. It's not as often, but that was definitely one of WCW's problems. We also see Linda Pillman, who is Brian's older sister, and she was great. I loved her in this episode, and she talks about how Brian had like over 40 surgeries in his lifetime. He had a lot of throat issues. Apparently he had like cancer early on as a kid. He survived that. But he talking about how his throat would always grow these polyps, and he would have to get them scraped off every so often, and they would grow back. And that's why he had the scratchy voice. He also had to have emergency tracheotomy as a child, where they got to put the hole in your throat because you can't breathe. So it's another way to get oxygen to your lungs. And then of course that kept him. He couldn't talk for a while, so others suspected that's the reason why he wanted to be wanted to be seen. He wanted people to know who he was because he had to deal with that. And I think that's very accurate, statement to make. So throughout the episode, we both see JR and Jim Cornette, who were both people who worked with him in WCW and in WWE. JR being the one who helped get him hired in both WCW and WWE. And they talk about their memories about him. They both did really good in the episode, especially Jim Cornette. He's always great in this show. Whenever he pops up, he's either funny or he brings a certain level of emotion and sympathy to the stories that they're talking about. He's really good in this. But the MVP of the episode is Kim Wood, who was the Cincinnati Bengals strength coach and also a friend and mentor to Brian Pillman. He was the one who they got close once he tried out for the Bengals and eventually proved himself. And he was on the team for a while, and they stayed friends. He was the one who had admired Brian's tenacity, and he was also the one who suggested after the ankle injury that he should try to get into wrestling. And he was great. He had some fun moments. I love that he was the one he was an outsider outside the business, and he was the one to help Brian strategize his con to get a better contract deal by playing both WCW and WWE against each other to get more money so he can help raise his family. Fucking great. That itself should be a movie. That was just great how he was just like, these guys are a bunch of egotistical assholes, so just do what you can to play them, to make them think that you're this loose cannon and you'll do anything, and you have to drive up your value to stand out, which is true because he could tell he was getting lost in the sauce. He needed to do something, and he also knew because of his injuries, his body was, and the way he wrestled, his body was breaking down, and he couldn't do this for much longer. So he's got to figure out something to take care of all the kids that he had. And that was a good thing where they they talk about how Brian, he was a street tough guy back. A lot of these old school wrestlers were known as tough guys back in the areas that they came from. And he apparently was like a bouncer, getting into fights and shit. But he was also a ladies' man. He was a ladies' man. And that led to a bunch of sad babies, and various girlfriends, stepkids, and all of that shit is just a mess. Did not realize how crazy his personal life was. Not how crazy, it was amazing. We see his daughter, what was her name? Brittany Pillman, who was his second daughter. And she talks about her mom, Rochelle, who was Brian Pillman's first wife, and how they met in Cincinnati. And then, you know, a year later, Pillman finds out that that's not his first daughter. It's actually his second daughter, because his actual first daughter was by another woman. And he had a daughter named Danny Pillman, who she was good. She was good in this episode. She's got cool hair. I like her hairstyle. And you know, he didn't know that was his first daughter, so he had 2 kids. He's working hard. And then we get the moment where Rochelle and Linda talk about there was an incident when he was working a show where they were living in Atlanta. The groundskeeper at the house or the apartment that they stayed at broke into the room and attacked Rochelle and like stabbed her with an ice pick in the face, which is like, what the fuck was that about? Like, I feel like there's a little more to that story. I wish they would have went a little deeper into that. Maybe I should did some research, but it's like, what the fuck was that about? So, and you know, Rochelle was dealing with depression. Brian was cheating on her. He ended up cheating on her with this woman, Melanie, Melanie, who was Brian Pillman's widower, his widow, the last, you know, woman he was married to before he passed away. She was a trip. Melanie, man, when you watch this episode and they show Melanie like what she looked like back in the day, she was looking good. She was looking good. I ain't gonna lie. Brian Pillman fell to the thing that happens to a lot of men. He was fucking with bad bitches in Atlanta, and Rochelle found out about that. He was cheating on her. They broke up. And then when you see you see Melanie today, she is looking rough. Okay, drugs and alcohol has ruined her life, and she's also the mother of Brian Pillman Jr., Brian's son. And she was a trip. She's definitely a polarizing figure within the Pillman family. And over time, once there was some issues going on with the first wife, Pillman decided to get custody for his daughter Brittany to come stay with him and Melanie. And Melanie, she realizes she regrets it now, because she's like, I would never want to take a child. She would never want to take a child from their mother. But at the time, they decided to get Brittany into custody because Rochelle was kind of depressed and kind of moving strange and all of that. Then that led to issues where there was an incident where she tried to pick up the daughter, or she went to see the daughter. They thought she was kidnapping her, so it got crazy. And apparently Melanie was talking crazy to Rochelle, and eventually Rochelle just decided to shoot herself, and that was rough. Linda had to be the one to let everybody know that what had happened. And Brittany is pissed still. She hates Melanie, but she's also blames her dad for separating her from her mom, which kind of made her push her mother to go down a darker path. And yeah, that was some rough stuff. And then like Brittany is just like, she does not fuck with Melanie. And as they show, she definitely didn't make things easier for herself. Even when Brian Jr. talks about how after his dad died, he had a stepdad who was an abusive asshole and beating on him, and both were neglectful, substance abuse. He was talking about how like he had a dog that would like keep whenever he was locked in or ground into his room. There was a dog that would watch him, and the dog would start biting at him and shit. Really roughneck trailer park shit. You know how it is, but it's dramatic and very interesting. So the worst person I would say though in this episode is not Melanie. It's fucking Eric Bischoff. This fucking lion ass goofball. I do not. Eric Bischoff is a great character whenever he's involved in wrestling, but him as a person, I don't take shit what he says seriously. That's why I don't listen to his podcast, because him and Hulk Hogan are a bunch of fucking liars. Him sitting here talking about trying to downplay when Pillman and Kemp worked to get him fired or to get Brian fired because he starts doing the loose cannon gimmick, and Brian just starts fucking with people and breaking kayfabe, confusing the industry, fans, people are just like, what is going on with this guy? You have the incident with Bobby Heenan and his neck. Bobby Heenan freaks out because he's thinking Pillman's about to fuck with him in his neck because he's got his bad neck injury. The strap match with him and Kevin Sullivan, where they're barely into the match, and then he just randomly was like, hey, I respect you, Booker man, and leaves and throws everything out of whack, which that was planned. Like, Sullivan and Bischoff and Pillman knew that was going to happen. The other people didn't know, but that was planned. So, it's just like, and then like he wants to leave, and he's like, I can't really leave if you don't fire me, because then people are going to know, especially people like Dave Meltzer, they're going to be able to talk to other people to know I'm still contracted with you. So if you fire me for real, it's going to look like I really left the company, but I didn't leave the company. Wink, wink, and Bischoff buys into it and releases him. So then he can now legally take offers from both WWE and WCW because he wants more money. And Bischoff has the nerve to sit there. He's like, oh, well, I told him I couldn't give him more money, but if I let you leave, maybe you could then try to get WWE to leverage something. You have to raise your value, basically trying to make it save face to seem like he didn't get played. But no, he got fucking played. Everybody knows it, but that's how Eric Bischoff rolls. And I love the best line. The best line is when the guy asks, one of the guys asks Kim Woods, what did he think about Vince McMahon? And Kim Woods is like, he said, what do I think about Vince? He's like, you do with a whore? You fuck him. That's what I thought about Vince. I was like, damn. It's like, damn, Kim. You was a wild man. And the crazy part is once he's finally he's in negotiations to get this contract after he's pulled this stunt where he pops at a convention in Vegas at a trade show at Vegas, and he gets Dave Meltzer's press badge, and then he pulls up on Vince and starts talking to him, and that's like one of those things that really makes him stick in Vince's mind. And Vince is like, I might want to sign this guy, but this guy might be crazy. And JR's like, dude, it's a fucking gimmick, man. Like, he's trying to stand out. You should probably look into this. And then as they're about to do the negotiations, as Meltzer points out, it's kind of weird that he's talking about he needs money, but then he spent all this money on this brand new Hummer, and he's driving the Hummer and ends up in a terrible car wreck. It's like fucking the fates. This life can take hit you at any moment. And then luckily he survived. He dozed off, maybe due to pills or whatever, and crashed into a tree trunk and got launched through like the roof of the car and landed in the field and shattered his face. And he had to get like 4 metal plates in his face, and his fucking ankle is broken, and they had to fuse his ankle into like a walking position. Which, after that point, it's like his in-ring career is pretty much done. But he tries to fight through it. He can't move. He's not the high flyer anymore. Luckily, Brian Pillman was a really good wrestler that he didn't have to just rely on his work rate. He could actually talk. He knew how to wrestle smartly in a way where he could alter his style, still keep it interesting, and still remain. But he was still going above and beyond and taking certain bumps he probably shouldn't have been taking, which, hindered his healing process, especially also alcohol and pain pills, his endless pain pills, as his sister describes that he was taking. And that really didn't help. And then also the crazy thing about it was like Pillman was such a loose cannon. He was doing so much crazy shit that some people weren't even sure if the car accident was real or not. They was like, is this a joke? Like, is he they say, is he ribbing me? Is he serious? Did he do this on his own? Apparently there was a theory that he got plastic surgery so he can look like Shawn Michaels and then play an evil Shawn Michaels. Like, that's how insane, not just how good his gimmick was, but just how crazy certain wrestling fans are, where there's a number of people who actually would believe some dumb shit like that. But and wrestling was so popular at this point in the 90s anyway. This is like the early thrusting into the Attitude Era. You know, the Monday Night Wars is heating up. So that shit was wild. And I love them talking about. Oh yeah, so Bryan gets his 3-year contract, money guaranteed contract with the WWF, and he can renegotiate every 3 months, which was a way for Vince to be like, if this guy goes crazy, we at least can renegotiate this every 3 months as opposed to once a year or whatever. So that was kind of a little insurance policy on Vince's side. And I like them talking about Stone Cold Pillmanizing Bryan's ankle to cover up for his actual ankle injury by like showing it on TV. So there's a reason why Bryan, you'll see him kind of limping from time to time. They gave a storyline reason for that. That was very smart. And also talk about the Brian Pillman Stone Cold home invasion gun scene, which when I think of Brian Pillman, that's usually my memorable moment, is him yelling at the camera and holding the gun and aiming. Like, that's because people always talk about that. That's usually when I think of Pillman, is usually that and the Canadian Stampede match, which I recently, sometime last year, went back and watched. And that match, if you can find it, I don't know if it's still on Peacock now, but if you can find it, that match is lit. With the Hart Foundation versus, I think it was Stone Cold, The Rock, Ken Shamrock, and the Road Warriors. Fucking awesome match. And Pillman, he gets it in a little bit. That's probably one of his bigger in-ring highlights in WWE. And of course, that eventually went to shit because of the whole Montreal Screwjob stuff. But like I said, the stuff with them, Stone Cold reminiscing about his pal, was really good stuff. The crazy part is they're talking about he was still reckless. He was still wrecking rental cars. He felt like he was living on borrowed time. You know, he's telling Melanie, like, hey, you know, if anything happens to me, make sure the kids got a dad, and make sure you might want to move back here, you know, closer to family, like crazy shit like that. So, you know, it was weird. And of course, we get the moment where Cornette talks about it was October 1997. They were doing the the Bad Blood? I think it was In Your House Bad Blood pay-per-view. Yeah, Bad Blood In Your House 1997 pay-per-view. Bryan hadn't shown up to the show. He ends up calling his hotel to see if he checked out. And the guy tells him, like, Brian Pillman's dead. And even Cornette at the time was like, are you serious? Like, what type of joke is this? But then the guy's like, no, the police are up there now. He's dead. And, you know, that's how everyone in the business found out. And he died in a hotel room at 35. And the cause of death was heart disease, had a heart attack, which, granted, his drug use didn't help, but it was also like something that was already in his family. His dad had heart issues, and he died young. So, you know, it was bad on both ends. You know what I'm saying? And the other thing they didn't state, but Melanie was pregnant at the time when he died. Not sure if it was Brian's baby, but she was pregnant at the time. No confirmation on that, but I think it was one of Brian's kids. So he passes away, and then we get the moment, which I've always forget about, which was after he died. Vince did an interview with Melanie on Raw after talking about his death, and he asked her about his pill addiction and stuff like that after promising her he wouldn't. That's really fucked up, but also that's Vince McMahon. He's gonna do whatever he can to get ratings. He'll tell you one thing and then fuck you right when the camera's on and it's live, you know? So yeah, fucking terrible. That's not cool. And, you know, time has gone on, and most of the kids still hate her. I know Danny was talking about how, like, Melanie being his widow, she gets all the royalties, and she hasn't, you know, bothered trying to split any of that with the kids. Brian Pillman Jr., of course, talked about his problems with her, but he's also trying to, try to get close with her. He's starting to rebuild his relationship with his mom, but he also talked about how their Aunt Linda was the one who did her best to keep because once Brian died, the money was gone. You know, they're back in the shits, not knowing when they would have food to eat and moving from place to place. But their Aunt Linda was the one who from time to time would get the kids together so they could at least have some sort of contact with each other. And she ended up buying this like family home where the kids meet up with her to hang out from time to time, which that was a nice upbeat moment to the end of the story. Really solid episode. This was a great premiere. And there were some other things, about Pillman that I tend to forget that it wasn't that important, but they didn't mention. Some of those things would be like he worked in New Japan Pro Wrestling in the middle of '95, like right in that moment when he left WCW. He was kind of like in between ECW and WWE. He worked in Japan for a little bit. As I said, he was part of the Hart Foundation, but he was also one of the Four Horsemen, the great stable. He was one of the later versions of the Four Horsemen. It was him, Ric Flair, Arn Anderson, and Chris Benoit. Which was, that was what was going on at that time when he had that match with Kevin Sullivan. So, he's got some really good accolades. It's just, his career was cut short right as the business was just starting to, get to its peak. He was right there and then he was gone as the business was rising. And that's one of the other tragic things about the story. It's like it's a young talent whose career was cut short, and he was like, could have been like another huge top guy, like they stated, he could have been up there right there with Stone Cold and The Rock and Kane and Triple H, all of those, Bret Hart, all those guys that were really heating up, Shawn Michaels that were heating up at that point in time. So really crazy, wild story. Really good episode. The reenactment stuff is still solid. Some people might not like it. I love the reenactment stuff. The models were pretty good, especially the guy they had playing Flair, because I know he's coming back. He looked good. He looked way better than whatever guy they hired on Young Rock. I'll say that much. But yeah, check the show out. It's on YouTube or on Vice TV if you got Vice TV. I hope most of the episodes are just going to be dropped on YouTube, because I don't know too many people who have Vice TV. So that would be their best bet, in my opinion. Especially be easier to watch it. So check it out. It's on YouTube. Let me know what you thought about the episode in the comments. Don't forget to like this video, share it, and subscribe to the channel. And hopefully stay tuned for more reviews of Dark Side of the Ring Season 3. Going to try to do every episode. We'll see. But let me know what you thought about the episode in the comments. And thanks for watching. Peace.